I asked the question earlier today in almost a dismissive manner, what do you think is America's college football conference? Now, I had a thought in my mind, and I thought a lot of you were going to agree with me. It was one of those things where I wanted to reverse engineer agreement into the show. I say it, you give the answer I wanted you to, and voila, that's how a segment's born. Well, I said it, but almost none of you gave the answer that I wanted you to. So I was taken aback. I thought, yeah, maybe I'm just looking at the wrong batch of responses. But I kept scrolling and it was a bunch of SEC, and there was a bunch of Big 10. It was a bunch of AAC because the conference has American in the name, not what we were trying to do with that exercise, but I appreciate the effort there. I have a thought in my mind, and it's not recency bias. It's not because we toured the Midwest last week. I think the Big 12 is America's college football conference, at least this year and maybe for the foreseeable future. Now, stop yelling, be calm, and let me explain what I mean by that. It's not the most talent-rich conference. It's not where the highest paid coaches reside. It's not the biggest venues. It's not the highest TV ratings. That's not what I'm talking about. I didn't ask that. That would be easy. That's just math. I wanted to know, what is America's college football conference? To me, America's college football conference would most readily represent what the college football public claims they want in college football. Okay, so right now, obviously, there's a lot of complaint about how NIL has tainted the sport. And this is stuff you would hear from fans. This is not necessarily me editorializing, although I agree with a lot of it. The transfer portal, the mercenary-like nature that players have taken on, certain players. A lot of you claim you don't like that. Well, I'm right there with you. So what can we do? We can either complain about it, which we do, or we can go find somewhere where it doesn't exist as much. Well, in my humble opinion, the more you look at the Big 12, the more you realize the least enjoyable parts of college football are the least present in the Big 12. It's not absent that. Like, you still see some headlines in the Big 12 that make you go, ugh. It's just less available up there than it is, and it's more plentiful elsewhere. So first thing, you guys claim you want competitive balance. You guys claim you don't like the same teams dominating the FanDuel odds and dominating the postseason picture. Do me a favor, try and figure out how to handicap the Big 12 right now. We did this segment last week where we looked at how many teams were reasonably in the tier 1 odds board in conferences. And in the Big 10, it's like Ohio State, Oregon, and everyone else. And in the SEC, it's like Georgia, Bama, etc. In the Big 12, like half a dozen teams that Vegas is essentially saying, yeah, if you think you know better than us, have at it. You got Utah joining the conference, by the way. You got Kansas State in there. Kansas could have the best team they've had in years this year. We just came from Iowa State last year, where they think that they've made all the moves they need to make a run this year. Texas Tech under Joey McGuire started like 14 quarterbacks last year. So if they have any health and consistency at that position, they should be in the thick of it. TCU absolutely due a bounce back. It's do or die time for Dave Aranda at Baylor. Oklahoma State just kind of hangs out every year and then swoops in at the end after everyone wrote them off. That is this conference. There is no more Texas. There is no more Oklahoma. And it's not that they won the thing every year, but they were the odds-on favorites every year because they had a disproportionate talent roster advantage. No one has that anymore. No one dominates recruiting in the Big 12. Some of them are better at development once they get them on campus, but that's more the spirit of college football, is it not? Which brings me to my next point. The spirit of college football, which, as you know, I told you last week, I think is at the core of what makes it attractive for fans, to me is woven into the DNA of the Big 12 right now. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to sit here like a 5-year-old and talk about the purity and the sanctity, although that's kind of how I feel about the sport way down deep in my heart, because I think that you should maintain some childlike wonder about this thing that you loved when you first saw it as a kid. Still believe in the Easter Bunny for the same reasons. But I think when you look at the competitive balance, you look at the fact that no one's drastically outspending anyone else in the Big 12. The talent rosters are roughly comparable. So many teams are at the head table, and the ones who aren't have access to the head table. You don't see a ton of negative NIL type stories there. You don't see a ton of roster poaching and mercenary type movement of players. You don't see coaches doing that as much. Culture is preached, but also practiced a whole lot more there, I think, right now than any other conference in college football. if you claim you love that, and if you don't, I'm not even talking about you right now, but if you claim you love that, and a lot of you do, how do you turn a blind eye to the Big 12 right now? And the other thing is, it is insanely enjoyable football because it's so unpredictable every week. And I think, again, that competitive balance thing comes into play. If you claim you want that, look out there. You got great venues in the Big 12 too. I know a lot of you may not have made your trips out there. Long road trips, really long road trips. But it's really interesting because the fans are extremely knowledgeable and they don't get credit for it because, it's not major. It's not like Ohio State. It's not Oregon. It's not USC. But the fan bases are really knowledgeable. They travel well. The venues are surprisingly hostile, even though capacity for capacity, they don't, go shot for shot with the Big 10 or the SEC, but they're great coaches out there too. Look up and down the coaching roster in the Big 12 right now. And some of those guys have had opportunities to leave that conference. I'm talking multiples, and they've stuck around. Now, I don't know how long we maintain that there, but I also think there's a better than equal shot that we do, because I think a lot of head coaches have stayed at their respective outposts in the Big 12 for a reason. They've stayed there because a lot of what I'm talking about does exist there. As the head coaching job goes, it's a lot more football. It's a lot more college football, the spirit of, than maybe is reflected in the head coaching job and role of head coach at other places. So I don't know. You like what you like, but as a fan, just as a pure fan, I can't wait to watch the Big 12 this fall and in years to come too, as long as the sport doesn't turn itself on its ear like it has been known to do lately.